The meeting was properly posted. Awesome. Next up on the general business is opportunity for citizens to speak. Do we have anybody wishing to address the committee? Seeing none, moving on to action items. First action item is approval of minutes from March 8th, 2021. Looking for a motion. Ranchak? And a second? Mrs. Voigt?
I'll second it.
Excellent. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next action item up.
If we jump to number 6,
We can definitely jump. Yes. Is he going to actually sneak though, or is he just going to saunter?
probably depends on the advice.
I guess so. All righty, so we will adjust the order and we will be moving to action item number 6, which is the approval of the Oakdale property garage demolition and the Waukesha Fire Department training exercise.
Try not to. So Tim Fleming's here from Waukesha Fire Department to talk about, and actually, I don't know how these conversations got merged, but we've been talking about demoing those 2 garages that are out there.
Yep.
I have pictures of them in the board docs for you if you want to review them. And but they would like to use it for training purposes. They're not burning them down, they're actually just cutting into them in terms of developing training for accessing facilities. So we've actually, that land, I guess, from talking with Tim, has been used for fire training before. So it's not a new idea, but after they're done training, we'll tear down the rest of the facility and remove the barns. But Tim, if you just want to outline a little bit of what the, a couple of minutes here, just
Absolutely.
what
So
the benefit is and everything.
first of all, just say thanks for the time tonight and certainly the opportunity. We've gotten a ton of great opportunities using that property from our special services team doing trench rescues there and looking to do some more training with our fire department, looking at cutting holes in the 2 garage sections. So I know I spoke with Darren. You have the pictures of the 2 buildings we're speaking of, the 2 garages to what would be the northeast corner of the property, I guess, as you're looking at it. And we'll be conducting just simply ventilation training, meaning we're going to cut ventilation holes in the roof sections of both of those garages and then some gable cuts on the sides there. Both great opportunities for our guys to train on that. It's obviously a unique training and we don't get a lot of buildings that we get to train on. So when they come available, it's a great training opportunity for us. And again, no chemicals used, no live fire training, nothing that's really going to cause concern. We'll have postings out there like we've done in the past that'll say fire department training, just so we don't have traffic issues in that nature. Certainly here to answer any questions anybody has as far as what we will or won't be doing.
Does anybody have any questions?
I did earlier, but Darren.
Oh, you did? You don't want to repeat it? Okay. I don't really have any questions. I guess the only question I would have is, are we concerned about any hazardous material in the buildings, like asbestos, when you guys cut into the buildings? Is that a concern? Has it already been removed?
Now
Lead paint, you know what I mean?
we might need to take some time and look at what's exactly in those buildings, especially the lead paint, those walls inside the bar. I have no idea.
Yeah.
So we might have some exposure to that.
Okay.
In terms of their process, one of the things we're requiring them to do is they can't use any chemicals themselves because we already have some chemical issues going on out there, so we don't want to
Okay.
come back and test right away. So no water even is going to be used for this.
Correct.
This training. So, or if they need something, it's just water. But we can confirm the.
I was just wondering.
Contents and
Yeah.
all that. It's pretty much just boards and
Yeah, that's what I think too. I
junk, but
I just know the state doesn't like stuff disturbed, especially if there's heating equipment that has asbestos on it or whatnot. Go.
Just real quick, thanks for coming, Tim.
You bet.
Just wondering, can people watch if they want?
Certainly.
And safely do that?
Yeah, we could certainly facilitate that. And if some people want to kind of come down and learn and see what we're doing, we would just like to know ahead of time just so we can have somebody there, because generally speaking, our companies come in and they're working with a training officer. So we'd like to have somebody additional there to kind of explain what we're doing.
Sure.
So if you had some folks that were interested in coming to see what we do, we're more than welcome. Just give us a heads up and we'll have somebody there that can kind of speak through it and kind of explain what we're doing.
Okay. And also, do you need someone there from our district just to witness it or not? Or is there
Nope.
any requirement on our end, I guess?
None, no. So there's a good look at one of the two buildings that we'll be training on there. So just great opportunity to use. The other thing that's nice and timely about this training is we just took delivery of some new ventilation saws that we purchased through this year's budget process. A good opportunity to get hands on some new tools as we move those into service as well. So
They must be powerful.
they are.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Good.
Any other questions?
Yeah, there is a third outbuilding that we're not touching. In the barn, we're not touching it at all, just to
Okay.
put this in context. But there's someone who's a fan of school, apparently, School Rocks on the paint. on
Yeah,
the
I saw
side.
that.
But this building, we're not touching as part of this. We might consider demoing it at some point, but
You know what that building's for? Is that the well house?
that's what I would guess based
Yeah.
on the size. But I'm a city kid, so I'm not much help on that. That'll stay in place, but obviously this site has off and on drawn the attention of
Yeah.
unwanted visitors, so we're trying to clean up the site and actually prep it for any future sale or consideration of a sale as well, so.
Excellent. Mr. Como?
I'll move approval of the Oakdale Property Garage demolition and Waukesha Fire Department training exercise as described.
Is there a second?
Second it?
Mrs. Voigt seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. That's 4-0. All righty. Thank you for your time.
Thank you guys very much. Certainly appreciate
Thank you. We appreciate it too.
anything else additional comes up.
Awesome.
Perfect. All right,
Fantastic.
thanks,
Have a
Tim.
great
Have a good
night.
night.
Be safe.
All righty. Now we'll jump up to approval of vouchers.
No questions.
No questions? Okay. Does anybody have any
Yeah,
Karen made
questions?
the motion. I
Karen,
second.
Diane.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, is there any questions on the vouchers that we might not have gotten into? Sherry, anything? No? Already looking for a motion for approval of the vouchers as presented.
So moved?
Excellent, Mrs. Ryanchek, and is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Como. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, so it's 4-0. Moving on to our next action item, which would be the approval of the 2021-2022 student fees.
Yeah, every year at this time, we approve next year's school fees so we can get out the registration information and all of that. So we're not recommending any registration or athletic or change in the technology fee at all. So we've left them, and you have the history and board docs too. We really haven't touched those fees in
Right.
many years, and we don't see any reason to do that now. So the only fees that we are asking to be adjusted are the food service fees, and if you recall, we don't have much say in that. There's a calculation that's done. It's interesting, DPI doesn't want us to have a big fund balance, but the feds like raising the lunch fee, so it's a constant battle between governmental levels, I guess. I don't know, Sherry, if you want to walk through the proposed changes on the lunch fees, or if you have any questions on the methodology that's used to determine those fees, we can certainly, I can just read through them, Sherry.
Well, I'm fine. I remember
Okay.
what they are.
Thought you could
front of
speak
me.
to them better than,
But I can speak to them. There were, I believe, 3 changes that we're recommending. One is the elementary breakfast. And part of the reason we need some of the price increases may seem high, but Last year, we didn't go through this effort because of COVID. We didn't raise the prices because we were in the everybody free under the summer food program for, it'll be almost 2 years now, or a year and a half. And so when we calculated it out this year, each year Aramark gets a contract increase. And so it put the breakfast up at a point where we'd lose money on per meal of paid meals. And we can't do that. The DPI and federal government is you cannot augment your food service program off the prices of the paid. You can't augment the paid student prices off the money that you get for the claims on the free and reduced. And if we were to keep it at the rate we would have to take money out of Fund 10 at the end of the year to pay the difference of what we gave up in each meal. So we're just asking the increase for elementary breakfast to get it up to where the paid prices, break even. And then same thing with the lunches. The elementary lunch is now going to be at the same price as the high school lunch. We've tried to keep them separate, but we pay Aramark the same price whether it's a elementary or a secondary meal. And it's just hit that point now where if we don't bring the prices to this level, we'll have to be paying out of Fund 10 to augment the loss on those meals. Trying to follow the rules. And the elementary went from $2.20 to $2.55, and the secondary lunch went from $2.45 to $2.55. Again, there was a gap now in the secondary lunch, which is why it had to be raised by the 10 cents.
Mr. Como?
I know it was quite a while ago that we changed the athletic fees, and we just said $150 per athlete, no cap. How's that been working out? I haven't heard anything from any constituents that they're upset with that, but so I'm assuming it has been working out pretty well.
We don't get a whole lot of question. I mean, that's not surprising. The athletic fees doesn't draw a whole lot of interest a lot of times.
Sure.
Because most parents know if they have their kids in club sports, we're running the best deal in town at $150. So, but other than that, and we do, we don't state it here, but we do make adjustments for socioeconomic. We kind of let the ADs tell us the cases that, so we do take that into account. So, but in terms of what I like about it is there's no tracking. That constant tracking in a district this size would be a full-time job if we had a different format.
And we used to.
Yeah, we used to have the family cap and all that, and you had to try to track all that down. And so I think it's working well. Would you agree, Jess? Or?
Thank you.
By the look of the document, we have reduced our fee schedule drastically.
Mm-hmm.
Got rid of the middle school level, course fees at the high school, with the exception of advanced placement, PSAT, and some band selections. And then we got rid of the AP courses were eliminated, and we also eliminated the summer school fees as well, haven't we? Yeah, so we've done a pretty good job keeping that.
Jess and I worked on that 4 years ago, roughly, but I'm guessing at the numbers, but I think for a middle schooler, it saved each child or their family, I want to say it was like $60, and then the high school, you had to kind of guess on what they might take, but I want to say it was like $90 or something in that range. So that was a significant, in terms of allowing people to have more choices in the courses they take and having access to those courses. I think it was a big step forward.
Yeah, I would agree. We've gone a long way on reducing that burden on our students and their families. Alrighty, so for a motion, we didn't do motions yet.
I don't believe there's a motion. Was there a motion?
No, there hasn't been.
We
Okay,
haven't done
I
a
think
motion
so.
yet. So we'll be looking for a motion. I guess I'll move to approve the course fees as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Excellent, Mr. Como. Any further discussion? All those, Mr. Como?
Just real quick, do we think we're going to continue the trend to reduce fees? Or Or are we kind of at the point where we've kind of eliminated the ones we felt we should?
I like this. I like where we're at in terms of the structure. We've simplified it tremendously, made it cheaper for families. The one idea I've had is, and this is very small, is to eliminate the 4K fee. People like free. I could just capture one or two more 4K students because there's no fee. So that's something we might bring back next year. I have before, other than being just an idea, I really haven't dug into it too much, but I think it would simplify things again without really having much of a fiscal impact on us. But otherwise, no, I don't know if we'd go any lower unless.
And I do truly, and I just speaking my own opinion, I think you guys have done a great job over the last couple of years to try and figure out what is efficient, what's fair. And, you know, this has been a multiple year approach that you've taken, so I've appreciated it and just felt like you should get kudos for that.
Excellent. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. 4-0. All righty, moving on to our next action item is the approval of a community library liaison agreement.
It doesn't seem possible, but 3 years ago, we approved the original liaison contract with the public library. So the language hasn't changed at all. We've updated the dates. The only changes was in Article 3, compensation and payment. The contract was a little, after the first year, the language was a little vague as to what we were supposed to be paying. So I've capped that payment at $55,000 per year. And I have reviewed this with the library as well. So it's just an extension of, pretty much just an extension of the current contract rolling forward, three more years. If we have any questions, Jim and I can try to answer them. There's the annual report that they did for the library board was in board docs for you, and then the payment history. We've been paying, the first year was prorated because of the start date. I forget what that date was. It was like $35,000. In the last couple of years, it was $53,000 roughly. So that's the financial impact. And this is all funded through the community service fund, just to
Oh, okay.
so you're aware.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, what's wonderful about this program is it helps our most neediest students. There's some fantastic programs here to really allow our students to get into reading and get excited about literacy. And, you know, those are things that are big words that we talk about here. You know, literacy, well, what is that, right? You know, so when you're a little kid, you know, it's just, I just want to have fun. And hopefully the kids want to learn, and we're giving them some opportunities to really get out there and have some fun. Working together and having some cool books to read and just getting that integrated into who they are. And, you know, this is targeting those kids who really need this. And, you know, we've adopted too, pivoted, I guess is the word, right? They pivoted the program when we pivoted to going all virtual. So they made changes too and tried to make sure that the program is still effective, and, you know, changed again this last fall. And I'm assuming just as adapting as our needs change. And I found that this is a really impressive report to get a sense of what that was all about.
Any other questions? What are the job duties? Exactly. Is that, I didn't see that. So I was just wondering what the specific job duties of liaison is.
I didn't have a copy of that in my file, but.
Okay. I don't think we've ever,
No, we don't have a job description on our end, but the library probably has a job description for the position. Todd worked closely in developing this, and
Yeah.
if you remember, brought that proposal back forward.
right.
It's pretty much outreach and an opportunity.
Yeah,
Not an instructional person, I'm looking for.
no, Darren's right. I think in a nutshell, it's collaboration between the school district and the public library and the van that shares the resources between the district and the library so kids have access. I think it's just an outreach piece and trying to make kids see that the library is a great place to spend some time, and also the library coming into the schools to impact kids differently, as Mr. Como said, in some of our most important places.
Do we know who the current person is that's holding this position? Do you ever see
Her
it?
name is Michelle,
Oh,
and the last name begins with a G.
okay,
Oh, Gagner?
Gagner?
Gagner, I think?
Gagner.
okay.
Yeah.
Michelle Gagner.
Did she ever come in and meet with anybody in the district here? Who is her contact person within the district?
I believe Amy Riebel is.
Oh,
Amy Riebel's
okay.
our library board rep.
Oh, okay. And it's a full-time position?
Mhm.
It is, okay. Mrs. Voigt,
I just have a clarification, because this had come up at the Waukesha Education Foundation meeting. This person, Michelle, is considered a full-time staff person for the school district of Waukesha on liaison role to the library. No.
No.
No,
Not according
it's
to-
the other way around. We just pay the old contract was we paid their salary, they paid the benefits, but it was
Okay.
always their employee. Michelle's not our employee.
Library employee.
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
okay, any other questions? Looking for a motion? For approval, or
So
not?
moved.
Excellent,
I'll second that.
awesome. So Mrs. Ryanchek and Mr. Como. Any further discussion on the approval of the library liaison? None, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? 4-0. Moving on, our next action item is the approval of the 339 Arlington vacant house demolition.
Yeah, we bought the property at 339, it's been 2 years or 3 years ago. And if you recall, the residence had burnt down, so that's why we showed enough interest to buy it, was we didn't have to take on the cost of the home. But there's always been that what I call the in-laws suite, that small house there that's not used for anything, and actually, here's a picture of it. Sits kind of far back in the lot, but we just think that it serves no long-range purpose whatsoever for the school district, and we're afraid that it's going to become a attractive thing to hang out around and those types of things. I would plan to bring Habitat for Humanity or someone in to, identify anything that they think is salvageable. But we're recommending that it be demoed, and then we can look at, even if we just stay with the lot we have, we can look at utilizing the space better than just having this house
Right.
sit completely idle.
Is there any questions? Mrs. Voigt?
Have you thought at all about what the space could be used for?
Yeah, I know we've had some conversations, I don't know if this was at the committee or just side conversations that Diane and I have had about, turning this over to Les Paul and see what they want to do in terms of whether it's a garden or a science lab of some sort. But our goal here is just to get to grade and a clean slate, that when and if we develop a plan that doesn't involve the long-range plan of maybe adding some parking, that we'd be ready to move forward. And I included in board docs an estimate. We have a quote from, I believe it's RAM, for about $18,000. There'd be some environmental stuff we'd have to do, and I'm not sure of the permitting process or whatever, but I would guess we're in that $25,000 to $30,000 range to return this to grade and shed this building.
Mrs. Voigt?
I'm not understanding the deduct of $4,800 for Les Paul spoil backfill.
That's a great question. I was going to ask the same question.
that up quick. I wonder if that was something to do with, because we've been planning and talking about this for quite some time. If it had something to do with the parking lot work, it was something that I don't think can, that's all I can think of what the purpose of that language is. But we would go through a formal bidding process for all of this. This was just to get us a budget number.
Okay, I got you. Because it could go, if we're not doing anything with the Les Paul spoil.
I'm not sure what our spoil is at Les Paul.
Yeah, I don't know what that would, we didn't dig anything out, did we? I mean,
No,
some
that's why I'm wondering if
foundations.
it didn't have something to do with the parking lot.
Okay. All righty, looking for a motion.
Quick question.
Oh, yeah. I'm
So-
sorry.
Given the uncertainty of what we just talked about, should we wait a month? And have that?
We're in no rush. If there's any
Okay,
questions.
well, we could wait a month. I mean, for
And we'll
sure.
have the question answered,
Okay.
and then we can
Get a formal
take it
number.
from there.
Sure.
I'm
Most
fine with
definitely.
that.
Okay. Agreed. All righty. That would be the end of our action items. On to the discussion information items, and the first one up is the monthly budget report. Take it away.
For our local revenue sources, I just wanted to point out that we're getting a nice steady trickle of student fees, and we certainly expect to meet the budget at year end for that. And our textbook fees and rentals are exceeding our budget right now, which is good because our interest in transportation fees are coming in lower than expected. But, and we don't expect those to catch up by year end. But fortunately, the areas that are coming in stronger are more than the areas that are coming in lower. So we still expect to come out good on that end. Other than that, we received our, one of our equalization aid payments and our per pupil aid in March. We had some grant payments from actually all of the title grants that came in. Right now, we're sitting really close to where we were at this point last time at 63.1% of our budgeted revenues. For expenditures, our salary and benefits, they continue to be on track. Every month we run salary projections just to make sure that everything's coming in as expected, and they both are. So we don't expect any issues there. Purchase services, the only thing I really want to point out in that is, okay, is that better? Yeah. Okay, thank you. What I wanted to point out in purchase services was our gas bills. We had a situation last month due to the polar vortex, and we work with a company that we do, we bid out on gas prices so that we lock into them for the year. I'm drawing a blank on what that's called, but pardon? Thank you.
Futures, yeah.
And unfortunately, we had a polar vortex here, and so did Texas, and all of the issues down in Texas caused a huge spike in gas bills or gas rates for several days. And it happened to occur at the point where we were using maximum amount of energy because of the cold here. And so we actually had a $100,000 hit on our gas bill for this month. And we talked to our consultants to say, wow, how could this happen? And he described it as the perfect storm as far as everything that happened. The other interesting thing that he did point out is while it seems like a horrible hit right now, as consumers, we're also going to feel that hit. They were, because We Energies can't just raise their rates, right? They have to go through a public hearing to be able to raise rates. So it's we're going to get hit with higher rates down the road, and it's probably going to be spread out over a longer period of time. But it isn't unique to us, this situation.
So just a question on that. Usually, and we may be doing it different, but usually in a futures market, I will buy a future now, and if it goes up, I make money. I don't lose money.
We just lock in, is all we do.
Yeah, so we shouldn't have taken a hit at all. If I buy a future,
More energy than we bought out.
oh, okay, so we had to go back to the market and buy it at the
Exactly.
higher cost.
Right, versus if we would have used less, we could have made a
We could have
fortune.
sold it at the market,
Right,
on the
we could have
market.
sold it back and made money.
Gotcha.
But unfortunately, because we had the polar vortex here
Yes.
for that period of time, and he also described that the rates, this happened to happen for a weekend, before
Yeah.
a weekend, so the high rates got locked in on Friday
Yep.
and didn't get adjusted then till Monday. So it was, as he described it, it was the perfect storm
Okay.
for this to
Gotcha.
happen.
And we're only doing that with 9 of our meters or sites,
Oh,
pretty
okay.
much. Because you have to have enough volume.
Yep,
You wouldn't do it for this building. There's just not enough volume there to make it worth your time. So most of our meters are actually, all of our small, or I'll say all of our elementaries, except for maybe Summit View, are just market. You're
Okay,
out there
just
like
market
We
price.
Energy's like your home.
okay,
So that was hit
Yep.
right on. And then when we do buy in, we don't buy in all of what we think we're going to use.
okay,
So it's like hedging the hedge a little bit, I guess.
yeah. What?
So that's why we did have some market exposure, but
Yeah.
without those hedges, we would have, I don't know what the number would have been, but
Right.
it might have been double.
Well, we might not have seen it right the first month
Right.
because
Yes.
We Energies, it would be in the future,
Yeah.
we would be continuing, and we will on some of those smaller meters, we'll start to see increases
Okay.
once they're able to go through with the process of recovering their funds, because they were obviously hit hard on what they had to pay for energy. So it is going to come back to the consumer, just
Yep.
at the point where they can go through the process to make that happen.
Right. What percentage of our gas do we buy in the futures market, would you say, Darren?
Total, I'd have to bring back that number.
Okay.
I know it's 9 meters, but I don't want to guess. I can
9 meters on a budgeted the year before, right?
What was that?
We budgeted according to the gas that we used the year before, plus a
Pretty
certain
much.
amount increase
Yep.
that we figured. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Mr. Como?
So we've used this process now for a number of years.
Decades, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, so I'm assuming it's working. It's
I
a
think this
better way
was-
of doing things.
This was the perfect example of it working, even though financially we had a bad hit, it would have been a lot worse.
And it would be nice, and if it's not like hours and hours and hours of analysis, to get some sort of understanding of what impact this has had on our district from a savings perspective, maybe over the last handful of years. We don't need to go back for decades, but, is this okay, this saved us $3,000, or did this save us, $100,000 every year, or whatever it is. I'm just trying to get a sense of how impactful this has been as a strategy,
Yeah,
as a process.
and when you look at this, this time it saved us money.
Yep.
But really in my mind, what you're doing with this program is you're stabilizing your exposure and stabilizing your budget. Some years you lose money, some, like anything when you're guessing what the price is going to be. But overall, I think it's probably saved us money. But I look at it more of, at least I know what my gas,
Right.
within a tighter window, I know what my utility costs are going to be.
Okay.
And I think we have, because this happened and it was such a unique event, I was thinking maybe this summer, maybe having Blue Edge, who's our consultant, come in and just kind of walk you through the program in general.
That'd be nice.
And
For
That'd
sure.
be good.
I think that'd be great, because this is not the first polar vortex we've had. We had a bad one about 3 or 4 years ago. And did we take a hit on that one? Mm-hmm. Because that was a bigger one than this one. That lasted for, I think, a month.
yeah, I think what was unique about this one was Texas got hit and shut
It went
down.
so far south.
And then what happens with the pricing is they set, like today, they'll set tomorrow's price.
Right.
Well, they set that high mark on a Friday. It ran all weekend, and then Monday was a holiday, so that
I gotcha.
we locked in at, I want to say $3 a decatherm. Over that weekend, it was $100 a decatherm. And if that would have happened on a Monday, the market would have corrected on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Right.
But it didn't. So
Okay.
just interesting stuff that you
It
never
is,
think you're going
yeah.
to be involved in, I guess, as a school board.
Yeah. Mr. Como.
And it would be interesting to have the consultant not only explain where we've been, how we've done, but are there other things that we should be considering too? And I don't necessarily want to go out and have them come in and do a thorough analysis, but are there other ideas that we should be thinking of where we should have them come in and say, these are things that you could consider?
I am having them look at our other meters to see if there's enough volume there on some of, to maybe go from 9 meters to 11 or not,
Right.
maybe it doesn't work out. So we are having, but a more general question, I think is a fair one to ask as well.
Okay. Excellent. Alrighty. Moving forward. Thank you, Sherry.
That non-capital objects, it looks like there's a lot of negatives in there, but we did some reclassification because of the FEMA ESSER grant things. And so we did some reclassing. We really didn't have this windfall of expenditure refunds. They're just moved to different categories based on how we have to claim them for the grants. So that isn't anything to worry about. Capital objects, we had some credits from selling some unneeded equipment and technology, which we do on a regular basis. Debt retirement, there's no general fund debt retirement, but we did make debt payments out of Fund 38 and 39. Our Fund 38, I'm very happy to say, was our final energy efficiency loan payment. So that's nice that one's off the books. And then for our referendum debt payments, we were able to make a over $5 million prepayment on that debt. So our current debt state is looking really good. Other than that, not much to talk about in Fund 10. We're on target where we would expect to be. We had talked early on that we might have to come back looking for budget adjustments to tap into fund balance. It certainly is not looking like that's going to be the case this year. We might come back with some budget transfer kind of things, cleanup, but nothing that right now is looking like we're going to have to do any tapping into our fund balance for this school year, which is nice. Fund 27 is our special education fund, and really the big things are salaries and benefits, and same thing is we're on track as Fund 10. Our projections are showing that we are right where we want to be. Other than that, not much to speak about in Fund 27. Everything's looking good. Fund 43, the only thing I want to point out is we had our final CD mature, so that's our nice interest chunk that we received. It's our last. Now we'll just be getting the regular monthly interest because the CD rates we looked into reinvesting what we had, and the CD rates are just not worth locking in at this point to anything in hopes that interest will eventually stabilize and get a little better. So we made the decision not to go for more CDs. We got rates back and just decided it wasn't worth it. So we'll see our smaller interest amounts every month, but nothing like that. And we'll continue to watch that if interest, as we have to balance how much money we have left to spend versus how, where the project prices are coming in. But, if suddenly interest takes a hike, we'll certainly look at that again. Then from an expense side, we just had our contractor payments. That's really mainly what we pay out of there and some furnishing expenditures, referendum projects, which we've made a good dent in that money. So I'm assuming we'll be finishing up that in the next year. At the schedule, Darren, to finish it within.
We'll be
the next
done
year?
August 31st.
Of this year? So none of the Hawthorne or that type of thing is coming out, or is that will be done by August too?
It's scheduled to be done, I should say.
That's all I have for budget report.
Any questions on the budget report? Mr. Como.
Just referring to healthcare and dental. Can you comment on both?
our healthcare is still in a really good position right now. Claims are starting to creep up a little bit, but nothing significant. We expect that at the end of the year, we'll have some money that we'll have to make decisions on. I know that probably the strongest recommendation will be to move it over to our fund balance for claim reserve. Balance out future. But we're still really in a good position there. And dental, we're starting to see more, but still in good position. I think that will probably end up where we were at the beginning of the year. But certainly not taking away from anything.
Are we seeing people going to the doctors more now? I mean, dental kind of kicked in a little sooner. At least it did for me, I know. And then, people started to go back to the dentist more comfortable. And then is that trailing over to the health?
All right, we had some more claims in March than we've had, but now April's tapering back down again. Our claims are shorter or smaller, and I think the big thing is right now, knock on wood, we don't have any high cost claims sitting out there that I'm aware of, and the claims are not reflecting that, but that's where we usually end up getting hit pretty hard when we have a couple hard cases.
Right. But the volume of people going to see their doctors, is that
We normally look at it in terms of claim dollars, so we could do a follow-up report in terms of actual people.
Because I do think people were holding back and they couldn't go see their doctors.
Yeah.
They actually, things that were, surgeries that were scheduled got delayed for months on end, all those kinds of things. So I just didn't know how back to normal, can we kind of have an understanding of how back to normal it is, would be, I guess, the question to ask. And that might be tough to answer, but maybe something next month, if you can kind of put it in perspective how.
I could look at from a claim volume, not a people
Right,
perspective.
a quantity.
But
Not a
month to
dollar-
month compared
not a
to the
dollar
last
amount,
3
but-
years to show where we've been. I could certainly do that. Now, again, that gets hard because in the past we've been hit with some high claims. So it's not going to speak to the number of people using the services. We can talk to Kay and see
But
if
Kay
she
might
can.
be able to pull that somewhere.
Yeah, she might be able to pull some statistics. So we'll look at that and see what we can bring back.
Okay. I appreciate that.
There's a shared belief out there, though, that there is some pent-up
Still is there?
services that at some point people are going to resume. But we would have thought we would have seen it by now, I think, but we still think it's out there, so.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Other questions?
Grab it
Either
when
that, or
we
I can go
look
with
up.
Esther first if you.
I would just need to go back to my desk and grab so if you want to leave, or I can go grab or I haven't gotten my iPad yet. Access things in here.
I apologize for my slow rollout of these pictures. I put a new operating system on my laptop today, and the menus are slightly different. So administratively, we're looking at budget as we do every time this year. This is a handout you have on your desk too, but I thought I'd just bring it up so people can see. And what I had originally thought about, how do you move forward? We have a structural deficit that I just rounded off to $3 million for the ease of our conversation. It's more like 3.2. And that's just the deficit we have been running into, mainly driven by resident enrollment declines on the revenue side, but by struggles with health insurance and everything else on the expense side as well. So I just laid out, this is sample. I just rolled numbers. I don't have actual reductions, totally $1.5 million. I don't have that list complete 4 years out. But I think it's important to talk about the ESSER money in terms of it being one-time money. And my fear in really looking at this closer is the financial cliff that comes when the ESSER money runs out. And it's really no different than using fund balance. It's the exact same conversation. Eventually, the costs, if they're ongoing, remain, and that pool of money, whether it's ESSER or fund balance, eventually runs out, and then you have a cliff where it's pretty steep. So this is just one example. So trying to frame the conversation a little bit. So again, if you work under the assumption, and our forecasts have been pretty accurate over the last several years, that we have a structural deficit. So each year, Cabinet sits down and we would hammer out a list of $3 million of cuts. Then we would bring to you a balanced budget. So, but with ESSER and the access we have to the money, I started thinking originally was, well, I wanted to make sure that we continue to right-size our district. And quite honestly, heading into 21, 22, my goal at a minimum was to eliminate all COVID-related ads we had, whether it was nursing, eAchieve, and all the other places that we added things. So I said, all right, $1.5 million I'm going to cut in 21, 22. Every budget cycle has some repurposing or ads. So I just said, okay, we're going to add 3 teacher FTE at $75,000 a pop. I don't know where that ends. But I end up with a net budget adjustment then of $1.275 million. The net position, because if you take the $3 million minus that $1.2 million and reduce costs, you still, if you did nothing else, you would still have $1.7 million of a deficit position. And I'm saying, okay, let's use ESSER funds to fill that hole. We can do that. I mean, I'm assuming this is a very simple look at things. There's rules to all this money and timing and all that, but just at a high level, the problem of doing that is the next year I come back, I have my $3 million structural deficit. I now have $1.7 million that ESSER paid for the year previous. So I have a deficit position of $4.7 million. Assuming the conversations flow as they normally do, let's say I come up with $1.5 million in cuts. I add 3 teachers back at $225,000. That next year, I need to use $3.4 million of ESSER funds. And that cycle continues until ESSER funds run out. So in fiscal year 24-25, I have my structural deficit of $3 million. The year before, I used $5.1 million of ESSER funds. I have a deficit position of $8.175 million. And then by this time, and I'm assuming we're getting $15 million of ESSER funds. We're going to use $3 million for maintenance. This is all hypothetical. But that last year, ESSER funds run out mid-year, and I still have that deficit. I have a $5.2 million deficit sitting there. So hopefully that makes sense. I mean, the cost is always there. We never, let's say the ESSER funds are keeping me employed. I come back that next year, but that money whittles down until that money is gone. And by that time, we haven't been cutting the $3 million a year that we're supposed to be cutting if the old way. And I'm not advocating, I mean, I'd love not to have to do that. But I really want, as we approach the ESSER funds, because as you might guess, whether it's every vendor who's ever heard of ESSER emailing me with great ideas for the money, internally, there's ideas for the ESSER money. But I don't know how we necessarily get around it. The only true way, this is just the cumulative spend down of the ESSER money over the 4 years. The only true way to avoid this, but I don't think it's realistic, is that every year we make $3 million worth of cuts. We spend all the money that ESSER provides on one-time expenditures, roofs, parking lots, HVAC. If we did that, there would be no financial cliff. You just have your standard $3 million structural deficit every year, but you will have cut all those programs over that period of time, whatever form that would take. So I don't think it's going to be this. I'm not recommending this, but I'm here to caution the board, and I've mentioned this to cabinet as well. We can't run out and purely fund our operation on ESSER dollars for the next, it's going to be very easy to do. Very easy to do, whether it's cabinet conversations or board conversations. But when that year 3 or 4 hits, I don't know what our plan is to, it could be $8 million in that 5th year because we haven't been adjusting our budget each year. So I'm hoping this makes sense. It's kind of a strange concept, but it's really about one-time money being used to pay off ongoing expenditures. And how do we strike a balance between these two scenarios?
Como.
So I agree that these ESSER monies need to be looked at as like fund balance money, one time to spend it. As in the past, we have tried very hard to use fund balance for only one-time expenditures. And I think we've been pretty disciplined in that. And it's hard to do. But the way I look at this, if I was to kind of summarize this, is I think we need to look very closely at figuring out what are repetitive annual costs that we have to cut. We have to look at this starting now. We have roughly 3 or 4 years to figure out what actions we need to take. So from my perspective, the ESSER money gives us some time. And I welcome that time. That's fantastic. But I think to your point, Darren, is you're saying we shouldn't really delay. We can't become dependent upon this money. And I think we just need to do the hard work now, starting right now. And what can we actually spend the ESSER dollars on? Can we truly spend it on just one-time kind of things? Or do we have to spend it on?
The language, at least through ESSER 2, and I haven't seen the specific rules, is it can be used as budget stabilization. Item 15, I remember, it says anything you pretty much need to keep your schools running, and I'm paraphrasing but not that large of an extent.
So you would interpret that as virtually how we would see one-time monies being spent? Okay.
I think it's pretty broad. Now, whether ESSER 3, which would be the biggest part of whatever we get, has that same language, I don't think we've seen that type of listing, or have we? Is it just out now?
Just that,
The comparison.
document comparison that we included. The only thing that made me nervous on that document comparison is they do have a line of maintenance of effort for ESSER 3, but that's conflicting with all the information that we're seeing about what it can be spent on. So DPI is still trying to figure out everything with ESSER 3, but I believe Darren's right on with what we've been.
And I hate the all doom and gloom budget reports. We do have some things going for us.
Yeah.
We did take some tough stances last year to end that fiscal year very well. We have a very sizable fund balance right now. Again, one-time money. Health insurance is our friend right now, but we all know that can turn on us literally in 2 or 3 months. But we think we're going to be able to put money in reserves for that, maybe freeze premiums for a year or 2. So we have some things that are actually, and we are working on a list. I'll give a shout out to Sharon Thiede, who's really going through class assignments and selections and finding FTE savings beyond what I thought was possible, and beyond what was COVID related. So we've got a lot of good things going, but people are going to want to spend that ESSER money. They just are. And the cliff is I think a real thing that we need to try to figure out.
So, Darren, can you explain what the structural deficit is? Is that is that reduced funding from the state?
Yeah, pretty much.
Our declining enrollment, our 3-year rolling average? I mean,
Yeah.
What is causing the structural deficit as,
Because of declining enrollment, and we're back into the exemptions on the revenue limit, because we have such sharp decline. What I would, to summarize it very briefly, is we have flat revenue at best.
okay,
And yet, staff want raises, health insurance is never cheaper. I always budget in my forecast a 5% increase in health insurance expenditures. That's $1 million in cost right there. And if your revenues are frozen, you're $1 million in the hole off of one line item in your budget. Raises are 2.5% on average, kind of in that range. That's millions of dollars as well. And those are the two big parts. Busing goes up 2.5% to 3% each year. We spend $5 million, I think it is, on busing every year. Well, you put 2% on that. And those are the big chunks that you're always fighting that inflationary factor on the expense side, while revenues are relatively flat. I think we've even declined in our revenue limit calculation. So, but it all goes back to resident enrollment.
so essentially income is flat and expenses are increasing on a yearly basis, which is creating our structural deficit.
Yep.
So I think there's a couple things that we might want to consider. And we can't take action tonight, but I'm just tossing out some ideas. We have roughly 3 or 4 years to figure out how to take care of our structural deficit. So what if we, say, hey, administration, we need to figure out how to reduce that structural deficit by $1 million each year for the next 3 years. And, that work could be done in committee here. There might need to be some workshops, because there's going to be some choices. And I would think that those choices are going to be difficult choices. They're not going to be easy choices. And I think that it's going to take a fair amount of time to develop that. I know you guys live this day in and day out, but what's it consist of? What are the things that we could potentially consider as a board to attack the structural deficit? What's that look like? How much time would you need to develop that? 3 months, 4 months, 6 months? But another thing that we could do is we could build this into our budget process. We could, as a committee, say, hey, look, we want to have $1 million of structural deficit to be eliminated each year for the next 3 years. We could make that a policy for us. Just like we have a policy for how much we should have in our fund balance. We have a percentage there. I'm not necessarily saying policy should drive, policy at the policy level should drive it, but it's either going to be this committee, the board as a whole, in a workshop format, or at the full board meetings. Those are just kind of some ideas I'm tossing out.
Right. So if we only reduced our structural deficit by $1 million a year for 3 years, that we're still going to have the cliff. It's just going to be reduced by $3 million. So what was the cliff?
Well, under the scenario I had, I would say in 25, 26, you're looking at about $8 million fiscal cliff.
Right.
Under the scenario, and it could be,
Yeah, so but what I'm
one thing I
saying
can
is,
guarantee, it won't be that number.
yes,
Right.
but if we only reduced our structural deficit by $1 million a year, the cliff would be
Good
4
point.
million.
We'd have to do 3 million right off.
We have to do
the bat.
3 million.
Yep.
To avoid the cliff. Because the structural deficit is 3 million, we're only reducing it by $1 million, we're still going to be compounding that 2 million a year.
You're right.
And it should compound because it will exponentially go up, right? Because it'll be, the costs are going to go up 5% for house
Right.
insurance.
3% for sure.
3%, yeah. So I think that, and obviously I'm not sitting in your office every day, but I think we have to get a little bit more drastic than 1 million.
Yeah, you're
To avoid
correct.
that cliff.
You're
'Cause
correct
There's going
on
to be a
that.
cliff, if we don't get rid of 3 million a year, we're going to have a cliff regardless.
I would agree with your analysis, yeah.
So,
And part of this will,
I mean, there's only 2 ways to do it. You either reduce expenses or increase revenue. That's it.
pretty much it.
and taken the ESSER funds and plugging a hole, I mean, it's like, it's with plugging it with sugar, eventually it's gonna melt away. It can't plug it forever, so, I think we're gonna have to look at it seriously about how we're gonna either raise revenues or cut costs.
And sizable revenues. It's not going to be
Yeah,
charging
yeah.
$3 for the tech ed class so everyone can have
Right, it's not gonna be raising athletic
Never.
fees by $5, right,
a metal clock or whatever they make.
yeah.
But, you know, I think the important thing for tonight is just be mindful that we're working on it. We've talked about it at cabinet. The other thing that we don't know at this point is the state budget cycle. Now, our fear, or at least my fear, and I think Jim agrees with me, is our state representatives are seeing all these millions of dollars rolling into the school districts from the federal government, that they might take this opportunity to save some money at the state level, which will
Right.
just make this even
That's, yeah.
a
that's
tougher conversation.
right.
So we'll have to see how that.
That's a fear of mine as well, and only the legislature can do that. DPI can't do that,
No.
and the governor can't do that.
So there's a solution in all this. We just have to find it.
Right, Mr. Como?
As part of this discussion, whenever we pick it up, I want to understand too, each year the decisions that this administration has made, the difficult decisions you've made for each of the last few years in terms of what reductions we have made. So I don't want the public to be sitting here thinking, we never make reductions.
Yeah, this isn't something that popped up
We
this
make
year.
reductions
No, this is
every
something we've
year
been going on for,
and continue to try and find ways to, through bidding, outsource, doing bidding process to get better deals on contracts, so on and so forth. We do this day in and day, or you guys do this day in and day out, and we approve it, periodically throughout the year, what you're doing. But, we have to go even deeper or farther than where we've been. And those discussions we haven't had for a while, but we've had them, closing the schools, things like that. How do we become more efficient? So those are bigger topics. And that's where I was saying, I don't know if it takes a workshop format. I don't know if I think there's going to have to be a fair amount of work done by this committee
yeah,
prior to workshop is
Right.
kind of my guess.
I would agree.
So,
yeah, this isn't something that just popped up this year. This is something that the district's been battling for decades. I mean, we have had declining enrollment for quite a while, which is flat revenue. And costs increase every year regardless. So this is a battle that we've been fighting for a long time.
And I think one thing that'll help us in our projections, if I'm hoping that 21, 22 is a somewhat normal year, whatever that means anymore. Because right now I'm going to have 2 fiscal years where it's going to be hard they're not great base data.
Right,
We shut down in March
yeah,
last year. This year, we had so much turnover in the fall, and, we had extra staff that we needed to get through all this because of COVID. I mean, so
Right.
it's not it used to be so clean. You could easily roll one fiscal year into the other, but now we've had 2 in a row that are a little different.
yeah,
So-
abnormal.
But we're on it. I mean, that's the main thing for tonight, but,
Right,
and we'll come up with some strategy but I do think I think some of the decisions that we're going to be talking about, I think a workshop format probably would be very helpful, so.
yeah, I would agree. Okay. Any other discussion on the ESSER fiscal forecast? All righty. We're going to talk about some.
One more.
Yes, sir.
so when do you see us getting the funds in and spending them, I guess?
Well, my goal, I mean, this is just the dollars. My goal is going to be spending down the federal money as much as we can and saving local dollars. It doesn't change this, but it gets us, my thinking is, if we kind of convert those federal dollars to local dollars, the rules and the timing and all the stuff that go into it, that all goes away. Then it's strictly on because right now, there is a cutoff. You have to spend those ESSER dollars by a certain date, just like a
Right.
grant, essentially. And I want to get that converted to district dollars so we can be in charge of our timeline and the things we want to spend it on. And that's just all accounting. It's, the net effect is the same either way.
So is that a month? Is that 2 months? Is that 3 months? Do you have a sense of what
Well,
that could be?
I'll just give you an example. I've been waiting on FEMA for 6 months, and I have no idea. That's $1 million right there. But the ESSER dollars, I would say, even remember the part of ESSER 2 that they were arguing over? We won't know that till fall.
Right.
ESSER 3, I would think, and I'm guessing by the end of the fiscal year, we should have a very, very good idea of the rules and all that, and we can report that out to you.
This fiscal year or next fiscal year?
For ESSER 3,
Yeah. This,
we wouldn't use the funds till next fiscal year, I don't think.
No, but we would.
we would know
would know the
before the end
rules
of this
and-
fiscal year.
Yes. yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I guess,
And the ESSER 3, I just assumed $15 million between ESSER 2 and ESSER 3,
yeah, that's combined.
and that could be 20.
Yeah,
That,
right.
which is a good thing, but it makes that financial cliff conversation $5 million bigger.
Yeah, right, for sure.
So-
100%.
But I would think by summer we could do workshops if I had to throw out
Okay,
a rough timeline.
by this summer. I mean, you have to we have to start thinking about how we're going to reduce that structural deficit before next year, which is coming up on July 1st.
And we're off to a good start. If you remember, the clinic had savings, that RX plan could generate a significant amount of savings. Claims are down, so I think health insurance, I'm hoping the premiums don't increase or don't increase by much. Like I said, Sharon's doing a great job with the staff counts or the section counts, however you want to look at it. I think we have some savings we're going to garner in the service building. So we're off to a good start this year.
Yeah.
The downside of Sharon's great work this year is next year she's not going to go find 20 FTE again
No,
with our current offerings and with our current class size expectations. And I can't believe that that's possible. So, but we've been doing a lot of work already. So I think by summer we can, if nothing else, just get everyone on the board on the same page as to
Right.
what we're looking at.
so essentially you're working on a structural deficit for next.
Yeah, because we
I mean,
agreed.
that work hasn't stopped
No,
because we're thinking some ESSER funds are going to come in. You're actually currently working on the structural deficit for next year's budget.
yes.
Yes.
We're going through our normal process for that.
Right.
Now, whether we get to 3, that's where it gets into,
And I mean, the goal is 3 million, right?
of that list.
Yeah.
I started out with $1.5 million thinking, well, we can use ESSER for
Right.
the other $1.5 million, but then I started thinking of the fiscal cliff, and
Yep.
then I started thinking maybe that wasn't, but I think we'll be at 2 million plus easily.
Okay.
Based on the work that I'm seeing from HR and what we've done with health costs without diminishing coverage at all.
Yeah. No, I just don't want people to think that, we're stopping that process of reducing that structural budget for next year because we have ESSER funds coming in. That is a thing that is
No.
going on as we speak by the business office.
Yeah.
Yes.
One thing with ESSER 3 that I forgot to mention, 20% of ESSER 3 has to be set aside to address learning loss.
Oh, okay.
A sizable chunk of that fund has to go to address learning loss, however that looks.
Yeah, whatever that looks like, whatever guidelines they,
They might pay for summer school one
you're
summer.
right, exactly. For the jump start.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a good point. There's a lot, this isn't free money. There's
But
some
there's
guidance.
stipulations, yeah,
Yep.
right.
That's the big one.
Okay. Alrighty. So, under the budget development update, you also have the water rates.
So there were some questions or comments brought up last month about concerns about the return flow usage charge.
Yep.
And there's really nothing out there that's predicting that. I'm assuming everybody knows what that is, but basically that was added as part of the alliance to use the Lake Michigan water, and this is what they're using to help recover costs for the building of the pipes and any infrastructure work that has to be done. So I kind of came up with some comparisons based on just purely on the rates, not on our usage. But
Right.
I did include a small, from a fiscal year perspective, usage we've increased over the last 3 years. 8.26 from 16-17 to 17-18, and then the next year we were up 3.99%, and then 4.14% last year. Now, that's just our payments to the utility. It doesn't reflect any usage or what
Okay.
the rates are, so then below that, I put the rate history from the Waukesha Water Utility. And in addition, so they've held their rates pretty constant for 3 years. They go on a calendar year cycle versus our fiscal year cycle.
Right.
They've held their rates pretty consistent, their actual water usage rates consistent for 3 years. This year, we took a hit, plus they changed how they charged per gallon. So like before, it was the first 75,000 gallons were at the one rate. Now it's the first 25,000 gallons. So the comparison looks a little bit goofy because they changed that metric. But you can see just in those categories of gallons, there's been a substantial increase this year on the water, ranging around 20%, except for that one little bucket of the 100,000 gallons that had a lower rate increase. But then you look at adding in also, you've got your return flow usage charge that was new in 2019. 2019 and 2020, they held it at 2.31 per gallon. It's now jumped to 3.47 per gallon, so it's over 50% increase in 1 year. It's difficult to predict what it's going to do, but logically, with all the construction that's going to be happening, we would expect that to continue to increase for us. And then the wastewater discharge, that's also had an 8.10%. So if there's other information that you want us to come back with, I'm looking for feedback on that, because it is kind of hard to go back on all of our bills and look at our usage, but,
Right.
it would take a considerable amount of time to be hunting back through that.
So Sherry, just so I understand, the return flow use charge at 231
Yes,
is on top of the 360, say, for,
correct. All those three components are on our bill as separate units. So the water charges are broken out by the number of gallons, but then the other two, they take our total number of gallons and multiply it out by that rate.
right,
Yes, these rates compound on top of each other.
right, okay,
It's just hard to say, well, here's the one rate because of the usage change.
right. Okay, so the top where it says percentage increase 16-17 to 17-18, that's how much our bill went up? Or was our usage increase?
That's our bill.
Our bill
So
went
it's
up.
hard to say because a lot of that compounds in what did we use that year. And the other
Right.
difficult thing there, we're going off of a fiscal year when we're looking at that
Yep.
versus the calendar year. But we hold consistent from year to year on our fiscal year how many months of utilities are paid in a given year.
Right.
And on the calendar year cycle, it would be hard to give that comparison because we might pay a bill differently on the calendar cycle because we're not worried about getting those December, January bills in a different. That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, but what doesn't make sense to me is, so for instance, in 2019, our bill per gallon, say that we just used 25,000 gallons, every gallon went up 66%. Because we added 2.31 to a gallon, right? So a gallon of water in 2019 actually cost us $5.91, right? Because you have to add the return, right. So we had a 66% increase in our per gallon cost just on usage. That doesn't include the wastewater discharge, which was a 19% increase.
Correct. And keeping in mind, though, that increase happened halfway into the fiscal.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I'm not talking about your numbers. I think your numbers, because you have it all broken down really nicely. But I just want it out there that, our water went up 66% a gallon, We had a 66% increase a gallon in 2019. Plus our increase in our wastewater discharge.
Then when you're,
But our percentage increase only went up that year, or, roughly.
think
4%.
I think schools closed in March, so
Right.
less water being
Yes,
used in the
yes.
second part of the year where it was more expensive.
So we could,
So I would expect this year it's going to get kind of ugly.
it's going to be very ugly, I think, because my water bill is very ugly, and I don't use nearly what we use here.
But I think that's why you're looking at that discrepancy is because the schools
Because we were
closed.
shut down for a whole quarter,
Yeah.
and then the summer we
Quarter
didn't have
of
any
the
summer school
expensive.
either, right, okay. So you're expecting a huge increase potentially, which is a good bet. Right, okay.
But we did budget for an increase too, so I'm not expecting us to be,
We won't be short,
right.
right, on our
Not from a budget
budgetary,
perspective,
hopefully.
we shouldn't be. But
But I think it's important that our constituents realize how much the water is going up.
and that'll
I mean,
just
they
keep
know,
going up.
obviously, because they're paying the bills, but how much is going up for the school district? It's a lot.
And the expectation is that return flow use charge is going to continue
Yeah,
to multiply as the construction begins and on those projects.
yeah, no, for sure, because,
Because that's what they're using to pay for that
yeah,
infrastructure.
right.
Big ticket behind that.
Yeah, because it went up this year from 231 to 347. We were in 2021, which is another 30.
These are the non-residential rates, so if there's
Yep.
people listening, they're like, that's not what's on my bill. Because we pay off of the non-residential rate,
Yes.
not the residential rate.
Right, okay.
Broken out a little differently than a residential.
Do we, and I don't know, I brought this up last time. The water that do we use water on, we still use water on fields, right? On football fields, are we watering not football fields, baseball dime fields and the practice fields and that stuff? Obviously, the football fields,
First, yeah.
and that was one of the driving forces to get out of, because the water was going to be so expensive once they started down the road of Milwaukee Water, that was one of the selling points to get those fields over to turf. But do we still have the liability of watering baseball practice fields? I know West has a diamond, don't they?
Yeah, I'd have to double check, but I'm sure we're still watering those fields.
Okay, so the only question I have is we're not paying a wastewater discharge on that water, are we? Because it's not being discharged to the wastewater plant. So at your house, you get 2 meters. You get a meter that goes to your spigot outside, and then you get a meter at your incoming pipe, and then those are deducted.
These rates are indoor water rates. I
Okay.
did not look, they do have separate rates for outdoor water usage. I didn't look.
Okay.
I didn't think about the baseball diamonds.
No, for sure.
So
So we're
I
on
didn't
that.
include those, but I can certainly look at the difference of
okay.
those.
So you're
But just to be clear, when you're looking at the bill, they have on our bills, they have 2 sections, and one is the water use and one is the wastewater
Yep.
discharge. The return flow charge is on the water side.
Yes.
I feel like the guy in the karate movie.
Right, yeah.
Sorry.
Little wax on.
So the return, I'm sorry, the return flow is on the water usage side, not on the discharge, but I would agree, I don't believe that the discharge fee was on the outdoor side of things, but I would have to look
Yeah, I
at
wanna
that.
make sure, 'cause
But
that's-
there's separate rates for that.
Yeah, that would be a lot of water that we'd be paying. If we weren't segregating that, we'd be paying a lot of money on a discharge that we're not discharging. So I'm just wondering how that works, because this is going to be, as we're talking about budget, this is going to be a big part of our budget moving forward, because these water rates are not going to go down. They're going to continue to go up. And it looks like 500 times inflation. So far, if you add everything together.
Part of our structural deficit.
That part of our structural deficit is just going to increase drastically. They like to separate it out like that, so you don't, when you add it all together, you're like, what? So, okay, awesome. Any other questions on the water rates? Okay, awesome. Anything else on that agenda item on the budget development update. Are we updated? Okay.
Are you asking for more? Yeah.
Okay, so our next order of business is recommendations for future committee meetings. Mrs. Voigt.
This afternoon, I was able to participate in the Les Paul staff meeting where they talked about a proposed idea from a community committee to rename the cafeteria in honor of Theodore Yeomans. That we started looking at this a couple months ago, and the committee now has to the point that we could probably be starting to present it to the school board. The community support is there.
Right.
And I'd like to recommend putting the renaming of the Les Paul cafeteria on the agenda next month for this committee.
Okay.
That we could take it for the first reading to the board in May, and then the second reading would be necessary before the change could actually occur, according to policy.
Ready? Sounds good. Mr. Como.
Yeah, I don't recall what all of the steps in the policy is right now, but do you know we've gone through and checked off all those things?
Been working on it.
Okay. Okay, and we think it can be done in the next month? I'm just, because... Oh, okay, okay. Okay, yeah,
Several months.
gotcha. Gotcha. Excellent, excellent. Okay.
Excellent.
I was just trying to understand how far along we were in the process.
Ready, any other recommendations for future meetings? Yes,
Yeah,
Mr. Como.
just the workshop on the structural deficit, we
Yep.
talked on that.
Yep.
I don't know if there are components, though, Darren, that you might want to bring to committee first that lead into the workshop. You know, I don't know if you need this committee to be a sounding board on components before we get together. I guess, so it's kind of
Yeah.
a question mark to be,
Yeah, I don't
if you think you need
Right.
some, but
I don't think that's a bad idea to get a little input maybe from the committee as the process goes on. I'm not talking about micromanaging it, obviously, but
Ideally, the state.
are you on? Are you on there?
Ideally, the state budget get wrapped up, I'll say it's June. We could update our forecast then, multi-year forecast, even though we normally do it in January, but you could rerun the numbers with the next 2 years of funding. And then we could start bringing in the pieces that are providing the challenges for us. We can talk about health insurance and
Right.
kind of maybe break down the projection into smaller pieces so there's a better understanding of it. But we can talk about that
Are you
too.
anticipating June?
No.
No, okay. I thought maybe
Being
that you knew
I thought we'd
something.
end on a high note.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, June, I mean, that's really optimistic. I love it.
I remember being in September, so anything's
Yes.
possible. So
Yeah, right, for sure. Okay. Awesome.
let us work on that process.
Okay. Ready. Excellent. Anything else? Alrighty. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.